I'm not blind, but I continue to look at the two renderings of the Royals' proposed ballparks in North Kansas City and the East Village. And outside of the roof looking slightly different, I'm trying to figure out how these two ballparks are different at all. Good morning. Welcome in on a Wednesday morning on KCMO.
The roof.
Sing it, John. Sing it, baby.
I'm a little disappointed. I like architecture. I like the old school thing that's going on, but of course we're so far behind. We're ahead of the time, so we need to maybe do something different. But it just looks like Kaufman with a carport roof today. Like we could put that over the stadiums out there.
We could do that for a lot cheaper, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Oh man, I mean, I'm watching this press conference yesterday as Brooks Sherman, Sarah Torville, and some of the populist folks are up there, and they're pitching the two stadium sites, East Village and North Kansas City, and they got the pretty photos and they got the renderings and everything else. And my big takeaway, as I'm watching this yesterday on KCTV5, was, are you really a month out from making a decision? Are you really in a place at Kauffman Stadium right now where you're saying to yourself, gosh, we don't know which one we're going to pick? And that's the thing that's driving me nuts. And I got to imagine whether you're a taxpayer in Jackson or Clay County is driving you a little nuts right now. I mean, they put out the pretty photos yesterday, and I've, said for months now, if I was investing $2 billion, it would be insane to invest $2 billion in Jackson County over Clay County, just because of the incompetent local government that continues to operate in Jackson County. It's indisputable. You want to talk about which county is being run better? It's not close. And then when you get into the micro of some of the issues in Kansas City, Missouri, that have permeated over the last 2-3 years, once again, it's not close. I know which place I'm investing $2 billion, if that's, an option that I had. So I'm watching yesterday, and I feel like I'm watching The Bachelor. I feel like it's scripted television. I mean, it's scripted reality TV, where the puppet masters behind the scenes know the outcome. They know how this is going to play out. But for their audience, they're stringing you along. They want you to be there for the next episode. They want to make sure that you're getting more emotionally invested in the product. I mean, why have a show that's 5 episodes when it could be 10? And if you make it a 10-episode series, guess what? You're more emotionally attached. You're more invested. You're waiting for the next one. And yesterday was not the season finale, obviously. That will be when they decide where they're going to go. But yesterday was kind of like one of those bridge episodes, where like not a lot happens. And you're like, all right, that episode is setting up the following episode. You watch those shows all the time, where you feel like, decent episode, not one of the better episodes, but, it's setting up what's to come. That's what yesterday was. It was the episode. It was the setup episode that's going to tell us what's to come. That's all it was. And there were some pretty photos involved. That's really it. We didn't learn a lot yesterday. We didn't get a lot of information yesterday. We know that they're still looking at a timeline of sometime in September to announce their plans for where they ultimately want to be, either North Kansas City or the East Village, downtown Kansas City, Missouri, for the Royals for the next 30, 40, 50 years. Nothing really changed on that front. But if you like pretty photographs, yesterday was for you. If you like looking at pretty photos, then it was a great day for you. But for those of us that are like, okay, what's next? What's actually going on here? There wasn't a ton that came out of it.
I like art. I did art in school. So, yeah, it's kind of interesting. I thought about somebody worked on that before it got debuted. Sometimes people just think of the product, oh, there it is. But I think about the process that created it. Maybe somebody was working in the dark closet. Don't go in there, man. Right? Don't look over your shoulder. So maybe that was top secret, but very interesting. Many pretty pictures and watercolor renderings.
Yeah, and, they look nice. As my neighbor said to me yesterday, he goes, but what's with the big lake pond thing outside of the North KC site? I said, well, that's for, when the team goes 20 games back by June and you've had half a dozen beers after a loss, you go for a swim in the little pond they got outside the stadium there. That's what that's for. So, Mark, you liked both. But you said that you lean towards North KC just based on the pretty pictures.
Yeah, I like that they have a park area. It seems like it's a little bit more spread out, which they said that would be the case for North KC. So I like that they have that option. It looks more family-friendly, I think.
I would give you that for sure. Yeah, they got about 70 acres up there compared to about 30 in the East Village site. So you're going to have a build that is more horizontal versus a build for the East Village that's going to be more vertical.
At one point, Kansas City was a city of fountains, and that was popular in the 70s, disrepair and that kind of stuff. The main reason the Royal Stadium has fountains is supposed to connect to that part of the city's past and image. So is that pond some type of a fountain receptor maybe?
I did see some fountains on the east side of the pond in the renderings.
Yeah.
And they were probably trying to tap into the City of Fountains thing. But
yeah, it was supposed to be more fountains than anywhere but Rome. That was like a 70s civic push. And then they don't really maintain them and they close. You just don't notice them so much anymore. They're just there,
They're there. You're right.
But
you
that
don't
is
really
part
notice
of the past.
them.
I thought there would be a tie-in maybe.
No, I think you're right. I think that's what they were going for with the City of Fountains. But it's way too big, and it's definitely going to be a place where drunk guys end up swimming after games. I mean, let's just call it what it is.
World Series fans protest throwing a Volvo into the new pond.
Oh, gosh. Brooks Sherman, the COO, no relation to John Sherman. Well, he's the president of business operations. He led the press conference yesterday, and what I thought was interesting is what he said about his relationship with both Jackson County and Clay County.
We have a good relationship with Frank White, just as we do.
By the way, that makes one of us in the Kansas City Metro.
In Clay County with Jerry Nolte. So those conversations are amicable and ongoing. I think John recently met with Frank, and we've seen him at the ball game. So those are negotiations that are ongoing, and we expect that to go forward.
Okay, so that's interesting. Brooks Sherman, president of operations, saying, hey, we've got a good relationship with Frank White. But here's the thing. Frank White still has not committed to even supporting a downtown stadium. That was in the Kansas City Star, that Frank White has not yet gotten on board with a downtown baseball stadium. He hasn't done it. He hasn't promised support. This is in the Kansas City Star from yesterday. So you're telling me that the baseball team that's a month out from selecting a site, and one of those two sites is Jackson County, Missouri, where, of course, they reside, and the executive is one of the better Royals players in team history. He hasn't promised his support, and you're telling me that's still under consideration? Does that make any sense to you? That Frank White not being on board means that the East Village is a legitimate consideration right now. Maybe it is. I just know this. If I'm looking at a $2 billion project and the county executive for one of my two finalists is not on board and I want to make a decision in 4 weeks, I got a problem on my hands. 913-408-7710. 913-408-7710. You've seen the renderings. Of course, you're also in a position where you don't know what's exactly being asked of you in Clay County or Jackson County. And do you feel better or worse about either county ending up with the Royals? And what does it mean, by the way, as we look forward and we say, okay, the taxes in either county, what is that going to look like? Still a lot of questions there that have yet to be answered. 913-408-7710. Of course, tonight is also the Republican debate, the first one from Milwaukee, 8 o'clock tonight. It will air right here on KCMO Talk Radio. So we'll have full previews of that as well today. Those are, of course, the two big stories we'll get to throughout the morning. Pete Mundo on KCMO. On the text line, we were just talking about Frank White still not showing outward support for the East Village Stadium. Pete, Frank White doesn't want a downtown ballpark because he knows that could finally be the thing that will skyrocket his own property taxes. Maybe. I mean, you're getting screwed there on Main Street in Jackson County, but Frank White's living high in the hog there.
No, it's just an opinion.
I know. Yeah. Oh, gosh. Well, now we find ourselves in a situation here where the Royals have their two sites. You've seen the renderings. If you haven't, they're up on the KCMO Talk Radio Facebook page, so you can go find them there. And you can see the pretty photos of the North Kansas City site and the East Village site as well. And you can make a determination for yourself as to which location is a better fit. Now, to me, the pretty photos are going to be meaningless. This is going to come down to money. This is going to come down to which city, which county can chip in more. Where can they get a sales tax passed as well, whether it's a continuation of the 3/8 cent in Jackson County or whether it's Clay County, which they're talking about upwards of a cent, a full 1 penny sales tax on every purchase in Clay County. That's a big one. 3/8 of a cent versus a full penny sales tax in Clay County. That could be a difference maker as well in this whole thing. And by the way, there is polling that was dropped yesterday suggesting that Clay County residents have no interest in a full penny sales tax for the Royals. So I don't know how accurate that poll was. I thought it was convenient and not a coincidence that poll was dropped the same day the renderings came out. So there's still a lot to be determined on this. 913-408-7710. Mike is in Gardner on KCMO. What's up, Mike? Good morning.
Hey, good morning, Pete. I just wanted to point out something that really hasn't been talked about a whole lot, but the locations are going to draw in a lot of different businesses to both sites. Are you going to be able to facilitate those businesses in North Kansas City? But more importantly, and you know this as well as I do, if you go to Philadelphia and you're in a business meeting with some people, you can go to dinner or lunch at Philly Stadium, whether it's baseball season or not. And if I'm going to Green Bay and the guys want to take me out to dinner, we can go to Lambeau Field. Are you going to have that same business opportunity in North Kansas City as you do downtown Kansas City? Because in Kansas City, you already have all the businesses, and you're going to have a lot of business people coming in. And whether they're playing baseball or not, you can go over to the stadium and shop or whatever.
Yeah, but Mike, we're talking about the stadium like it's, up in St. Joe. I mean, the North Kansas City site's 2.5 miles away, right?
Well, that's true.
I mean, if you really want to go there, listen, I think that if there's not a baseball game going on, you're going to go to the best restaurant in town. Yes, there will be a moment in time when it's going to be cool to go to the stadium if they have some hip new restaurant. But for the most part, people are going to pick and choose. If you're at a business lunch or a business dinner, you're going to go where the food is good and the service is good. And if that happens to be at the new baseball stadium, then fine. But the ultimate driver after the initial shine wears off is going to be what's convenient, where's the food good, and where's the service good.
And you said it, money.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
You bet. Absolutely there, Mike. That's what we're here for, brother. Now, like every new ballpark, I mean, when it opens up the first year or two, everyone goes because of the new ballpark, not because of the baseball team. You see it everywhere in the country. But then eventually, like everything else in life, you settle back into your routine and you go to the ballpark if you want to see a baseball game. That's how it goes. And yes, the Royals, with this ballpark village they're going to build at either site, will have restaurants and, apartments and commercial real estate and things like that. And that'll be good for them, potentially. But in the end, after a couple of years after that shine wears off, the only reason anyone's going to go to the restaurants or the bars is if there's an event going on or if there's just a great bar or a great restaurant that people love in the area. And that's fine, but you're not going to go there because, well, that's where the baseball team plays 81 times a year.
Right. With Power and Light District, I'm sort of, I guess, disappointed, but maybe just me as an old man. It's like there's nothing there that I would drive to the Power and Light District to eat at any one of those facilities or drink there necessarily. None of those.
No.
You know, and I'm disappointed because I would have thought, maybe a Jack Stack or something like that would be a Q39. But you come in and you bring in somebody and then the rent's high. They don't last 18 months because they're not as good as other places around town, et cetera. Like you say, got to have good food, good service.
You need that.
So I don't find any destination at Power and Light right now.
No, there isn't. I mean, I'm only going to go down there if I'm going to an event down there, right? I'm going to a concert at T-Mobile, I'll find somewhere to eat. But even then, sometimes I won't because I know it's going to be too crazy around there. So, I've done a lot of things down at Power and Light and not eat there before because I don't want to deal with the chaos. So I'm not worried, to Mike's point, I'm not worried about that being a situation where, we got to have it downtown because the businesses are downtown and that's where the restaurants are going to be. It's like, no, people will go if the food is good, if the service is good, people will find you. And if it happens to be 2.5 miles away in North Kansas City, that's going to be fine. That will work out. The Royals should not be thinking twice about, what if we have this great restaurant and we're in North KC? Well, you know what? That's the fastest growing part of the region anyway, so it's not a bad place to be if you're making a 30 to 40-year bet, which is really what they're doing here. The Royals are making a 30 to 40-year bet on what the future of this region is going to look like. And that gets back to the politics of it as well, which is, hey, what makes the most amount of sense here? From a political perspective, what makes sense for the next 30 to 40 years in terms of where we want to bet $2 billion? $2 billion. 913-408-7710 is how you join us on KCMO Talk Radio, 710 AM and 103.7 FM. On the text line, Pete, I see some toll bridges coming in our future.
Mark and I think we're just talking about it. Got maybe a few more bridges coming?
Yeah, bridges with tolls. Oh, gosh. Yeah.
I was thinking a bridge for the streetcar, but...
Oh, no, Mark. Don't give him any ideas. No. Oh, gosh. Don't do it, man. Don't do it.
Come on, man.
Ish. All right. Well, I might be screaming that at the TV tonight as I'm watching the GOP debate. Don't do it, Christie. Come on, Chris. Don't do it. I don't know. We'll see how it plays out tonight. What's at stake tonight in the first GOP debate of the 2024 cycle? We'll get to that coming up next. It's going to be a weird night. It will be the first time since, going back to the 2012 cycle. Think about that. 11 years, 12 years at this point, if you go back to the cycle that started in 2011, that we haven't had Donald Trump on a Republican presidential debate stage or a general election debate stage. It's weird, right? But he's not going to be there tonight. And that creates massive opportunity for some of the other candidates. I've said all week that ever since Trump announced he wasn't going to be there tonight, I thought, all right, I get it. If I was Trump, I probably wouldn't show up either. Why show up for 1% Chris Christie to try to make a fool of you? I mean, you're up 40 points in the polls, give or take, 10. You're going to go out there and allow Chris Christie to embarrass you? There's no point in Chris Christie being on this debate stage tonight, none whatsoever. So if you're Trump, I think Trump should get on the debate stage. I think it's important that he gets on the debate stage at some point, but it doesn't have to be tonight. Wait till some of these, for lack of a better word, losers at the bottom basically get told to take a hike and no longer have the support to qualify for the debate stage. The Christies of the world, the Asa Hutchinsons of the world, they're wasting everybody's time. So once they go away, I do believe Trump should get on the debate stage, but I understand tonight why he's not. So what does that mean? For tonight, the question is simply this. Does a clear number 2 emerge? Does the Trump alternative emerge tonight? Now, 3 months ago, this would have been a comical conversation. You would have said, well, it's obviously Ron DeSantis or Donald Trump. That's kind of it. Those are the options. Well, that's not the case. Because Ron DeSantis has had such a weak campaign rollout, and it's been enormously disappointing. And some of that's personality-driven. Some of that is also just, his obsession with trying to run to Trump's right on cultural stuff, which is not working for him by any stretch of the imagination. So can Ron DeSantis reboot tonight? This is his chance. If Ron DeSantis falls flat tonight, then he's officially, Scott Walker from 8 years ago. Governor of a state that a lot of people had high hopes for. Oh, yeah. Oh, we love Scott Walker. Wisconsin governor. Woo! And completely flamed out. I mean, faster than anybody would have guessed. That could be Ron DeSantis tonight.
My question then, maybe for you, was, do you think in order for someone to come up on DeSantis's tail, if you will, he'll have to fall flat, DeSantis?
Yeah.
Or will someone be impressive enough to close the gap, do you think?
Oh, I see. Yes. I see what you're saying there.
I do, but...
I'm sitting here and I'm thinking to myself, DeSantis can fall flat by somebody else having a moment, I guess. My thought is that those things could work together. Where if Vivek Ramaswamy has this huge night and he's just, on fire as he's been in a lot of these public meeting settings he's gone to, and DeSantis is just kind of like, yeah, we did a good job in Florida, then DeSantis falling flat at the expense of, let's say, a Vivek Ramaswamy, both those things happen in conjunction.
I suppose that maybe DeSantis makes some kind of mistake or gaffe more than just his message being the same stuff, different day.
I see. No, I see. I don't think
would
DeSantis...
it take something like that?
No, I don't think it would. I
right.
think that I don't worry about DeSantis saying something that is wrong or not having a full grasp of the issues. Mm-hmm. I think he knows the issues as well as anybody. He just doesn't have the pizzazz that people look for right now in politics.
The problem as I see it.
Yeah.
Because my number 3 guy, I guess, at the moment, I don't know if I'm ranking him, but I like Ramaswamy. Mm-hmm. He does not talk about other candidates. He talks about himself. He talks about his policies. That may ring better with the open-minded, independent voter who's paying attention right now. Mm-hmm. Right, so he may gain some ground, close in on DeSantis. I don't think he'll pass him tonight, but I think he'll make a good impression for those that haven't seen him.
Yeah, I agree. And there's a lot of people, like we talk about this stuff every day, but there's a lot of people who are going to be watching tonight for the first time and are like, Vivek Rama, what? Who? This guy's good. I guarantee you there's going to be millions of Americans tonight who aren't as locked in as many of you are listening to this show and are like, hey, that guy Vivek, wow, I don't know who he is, but he's got a great story. He's, under 40. He's, turned himself into a tech multimillionaire many times over, and he's impressive, and he knows how to sell a story.
Well, especially when he's being criticized and attacked to his face. He was on Charlemagne the God in that goofy show, and it's a wild video to watch, but he handled himself very well, so it's almost the antithesis of Trump. It would be interesting to see the two of them and how he might roll off of some of Trump's stuff. And
it's been the antithesis of DeSantis until recently, where Ramaswamy was smart. He was confident to go into almost any media setting and take the hits and explain himself and be the guy who's going to go anywhere and make his pitch to anybody who will listen. And Ron DeSantis, by comparison, had this very safe rollout. He did some conservative media and, kind of thought that his pack would carry him. And that's not what Vivek Ramaswamy has done. And I respect the heck out of him for that. And it's certainly been the antithesis of Trump, who hasn't done anything outside of Hannity and Newsmax, as far as I can tell. So I do, to your point, John, respect what Vivek Ramaswamy has done. Now, do I think that he's going to be the nominee? No, I don't. But I think he's certainly setting himself up for a situation where he becomes a guy who is incredibly compelling to the average Republican voter. Now, some of the other people on stage tonight, Mike Pence, I like Mike Pence personally. I think he did the right thing during his 4 years in the White House from day one to, all the way till the end, January 6th and beyond. But there is no reason for Mike Pence to be on that stage tonight. There's no way that Mike Pence is ever going to be the nominee. And then, you look at some of the other folks. Nikki Haley, okay. Tim Scott's a guy who's got an opportunity here. Tim Scott's kind of gone for the happy warrior approach, and it's kind of worked, but not really. But Tim Scott is kind of hoping a couple of things happen. He's hoping that Ramaswamy and DeSantis are swinging at each other tonight, and he's the guy in the corner saying, don't don't forget about my compelling story. Rah, rah, America. This country is still, the greatest experiment in the history of mankind, and we must love this country. He's kind of going for the Reagan thing, but it hasn't caught on. Tonight, it's got a chance to catch on. I wouldn't be shocked if it caught on, but it's only going to catch on if DeSantis and Ramaswamy are in the mud with each other, and then Tim Scott's in the corner looking like the adult in the room. Chris Christie, I'm not expecting a lot outside of, farts and burps and sweats from Chris Christie. That's probably all we're going to get there. And Doug Burgum, the North Dakota governor, I don't know what the point of this guy is. He's the one who attracted donors with a gift card scheme, $20 gift cards in exchange for $1 donations. And that's how he got himself to the 40,000 donor threshold to get on the stage tonight. And then last and certainly least is Asa Hutchinson, the former Arkansas governor, who has also kind of ridden in that Chris Christie lane as a big-time Trump critic. So the purpose of him, I have no idea, but he is going to be on the debate stage tonight. So it's going to be fun to watch, and I'm intrigued to see how this plays out. 913-408-7710. And I'll add this as well. If it's about policy, and I hope it is, we actually might get a glimpse into the future of the Republican Party. If it's all about Trump, then we're not going to learn a lot tonight. So we'll see how Brett Baer and Fox News handle that. I hope, because I want to actually see people talk about policy, not about who's not there. I'm sure that'll be the first question, but after that, please, I hope they move on quickly. 913-408-7710. I got, well, as usual, got some crap on social media for my take on the Kansas City Public Schools shutting down early this week. And, I had to put some people in their place, and I'll tell you how we did that coming up next. I can always tell when I'm bothering, a certain crowd on social media that I'm on the right track. That's usually the approach that I have. Good morning. Happy Wednesday. It's a hump day. Thanks for joining us on KCMO Talk Radio. So yesterday, Kansas City Public Schools announced that they were going to be closing early for the rest of the week. So from high school to elementary, they were going to be letting out between like 11 a.m. and 1 p.m. They're still serving lunch. They're doing all that. But I'm sitting here, I'm like, all right, second week of school, and already Kansas City Public Schools has decided they're going to be shutting down half days because of the heat. Now, don't get me wrong, it's hot, and I understand why they're doing it. You got heat indexes of 110 to 120 degrees this week, so I'm sympathetic to it. But for a school that has expenditures of $250 million, that's right, $255 million, that's the number when it comes to expenditures for the Kansas City public school system. A superintendent making $275,000. I sit here and I say to myself, well, hold on a second. Hold on a second. You're telling me that with $250 million in expenditures, you can't find some window AC units to put in classrooms to make sure kids are learning? So I put this up on social media yesterday. I talked about it on the show. And oh my goodness, the wokesters came after me. Mundo's got the dumbest idea I've ever heard. Oh my goodness, could you imagine trying to put window units? What's he even talking about with window units? Could you imagine the cost of that? Well, yeah, I can. First off, I went to public school with window units. I remember hearing, and I have a vivid memory of having a hard time on warm days not hearing teachers because of the window units. But guess what? There was only a few days a year you had to use them. The teacher had to speak up. And guess what? You were in the classroom and you were learning. You weren't running around town. You weren't out on the streets. I grew up in a public school that used window units. So I found it awfully funny to hear people trying to troll me saying, what's this guy talking about, window units? Say the kids who, probably went to cushy prep schools with central AC. Window units are pretty common. And if you do the math on this, and the math is not hard, let's say the Kansas City Public Schools want to buy, and I'm just going to throw out a nice round number, So they want to buy 500 window units. They can spread out in classrooms of need across the school district. Let's just, once again, maybe it's more, maybe it's less. Let's say 500 window units. And they can get the 5,000 BTUs, right? I mean, those aren't too expensive. The 5,000 BTU window units might not be perfect, but it'll cool down a classroom, I would say. So I looked them up on Amazon, and they're about 120 a pop, anywhere from 110 to 150, depending on the quality that you want. So I know it's early. I know it's before 7 o'clock, but let's just do that math together. 500 window units at $120 a pop. That's $60,000. It's about 20% of what the superintendent makes. And if you want to really dig deep on what that is compared to what the expenditures are, we're talking about 0.02% of the annual expenditures. You're telling me that you couldn't dig up, if you're running Kansas City Public Schools, 0.02% of the budget to keep kids cool in Kansas City Public Schools in August, September, and maybe at the end of the year in May if you get a heat wave. You can't dig up 0.02% of the budget to find some window units? And you can tell who's actually ever installed a window unit before, and I have. I used to live back east, and there's not a ton of central air. The old buildings don't have them, so I've put, a handful of window units in my time. Not that I'm, Mr. Fixer-Upper. I'm not.
Nobody will mistake you for Bob Hamilton here.
No. Trust me. No one's going to look at me and think I'm Bob Hamilton 2.0. I promise you that. But I put in a window unit or two. And the people who were on social media yesterday saying, oh, well, who's going to install these window units that Mundo wants to put in? I don't know, the janitor, the teacher themselves. It's really not all that difficult. You can do it. You can look at the instructions and install a window unit. It'll be just fine. But the excuse making, and this is what it really comes down to, the excuse making for these people, as if you work for a public school system, you can do no wrong. Oh, you are God's gift to the public sector. And by the way, there are millions of teachers across this country and thousands right here in the Kansas City area who are doing great work every day. I don't have problems with really most of them at all, unless they're trying to push woke nonsense in their classrooms. But the administrative bloat that is putting the system before the students and their families, they're the ones who I have zero sympathy for. They're the ones who have to be called out time and time again. Because they're the ones who are like, you know what? Half days for the kids. Let the parents figure out what to do with them. As, by the way, the superintendents and the administrators all making well into the six figures. Don't worry. They're enjoying their, plate of caviar as the kids are trying to figure out what to do with themselves after they get out at noon. And the parents, aren't around until later in the day because they're working to pay taxes that theoretically are going towards the school system to teach the kids something, which now is not happening.
If the students came first, then your plan would be, okay, students first, got to keep them in school, got to teach them something. What if we can't go to school? Well, if tornado, flood, whatever. Well, we have remote learning. Where's that all of a sudden?
Oh, yeah, that's a good point, too.
Remember that?
Yeah.
Or is that only for certain instances?
Yeah, maybe that's right. Could have done that. And I've got a compromise here for everybody that should work. Let's just take the DEI coordinators, blow them out, and take those salaries and buy some window units. Can we all agree? How about? Can we good? We good on that? Can we take that approach instead? I think that would work. Unbelievable that anybody would push back on a common sense idea like this. Pete Mundo on KCMO Talk Radio. Welcome and happy Wednesday. It's debate night for the GOP. Grover Norquist will preview that with us after the news. All right, who's right here? Who is right when it comes to Clay County and whether or not you have any interest in actually having potentially up to a 1-cent sales tax to bring the Royals up north? Well, it depends who you listen to. Yesterday, the two renderings came out for the North Kansas City Stadium site and the East Village Stadium site that the Royals are considering for their future home. And how convenient that very same day a poll drops. 300 registered Clay County voters. It was done by Bold Decision. That's quite a name for a D.C. firm.
That might tell me something.
They provide research services for corporate, political, and public sector clients, a copy of which was provided to the Kansas City Business Journal. They drop a poll yesterday that shows, well, Clay County residents don't really have any interest in paying a tax for the new stadium if it were to move up north. So here's what the numbers actually showed. Close to half of the people surveyed, 47%, said they would favor a stadium, 37% opposed, 15% undecided. However, Clay County voters indicated strong opposition to a new sales tax for a Royals move to North KC. 70% of residents or respondents said they would be opposed to a sales tax for a Royals move to North KC. 22% in support, 8% undecided about their stance on a new tax to help fund construction of a new multi-billion-dollar stadium and mixed-use development. Now, I find the timing of this awfully suspect. Also, what was interesting is Bold Decision declined to say who paid for the survey, citing company policy, but verified its authenticity. Don't worry. Now, that's an awfully small sample size, too, is it not? 300 registered Clay County voters. Now, Sarah Torville, who was there yesterday at the press conference, was asked about this, and she's in the front office with the Royals, and here's what she had to say.
We were made aware of that poll today. We aren't sure who commissioned that poll. What I can tell you is that we've assembled a team of local and national experts with sophisticated polling experience. That polling data has been very constructive, and we see a path to victory in both counties.
So she's admitting, never heard of the poll, never saw the poll until today. It's not a coincidence that this poll drops the same day the Royals release the renderings. That's no way is that a coincidence. And then you hear her also say she's not admitting that she feels great about a sales tax passing in either county, but clearly what she is saying is we see a path to victory in both counties depending on which stadium site we pick. Now, that's telling. What I'm hearing there is, yes, we've got a bit of an uphill climb, especially in Clay, compared to, say, Jackson County, but we think we can get it done. We believe we can get a sales tax approved for this stadium in Clay County. That's what I hear in that comment from Sarah Torville. So I'm thinking about this from the perspective of why and who would be behind a poll like this. And what I've heard, what I've gathered is that people with interests downtown obviously would commission a poll like this. Maybe people who own parking garages. Maybe organizations like the Downtown Council would commission a poll like this and then just throw it out there and try to scare the Royals into not going up north. It makes sense, right? Now, I don't know who's behind it. I'm just throwing out some options and ideas of who could be behind it, but it makes all the sense in the world. And then you drop this poll to your friends in the media the day that the renderings come out. This is all carefully coordinated. And the fact that the Royals had no idea this poll was dropping until the day of the renderings tells me that this is it. This is the last stand for organizations who are trying to keep the Royals in Kansas City, Missouri proper and keep them downtown. Well, you don't want to go up north because you're going to be embarrassed when this thing goes to the ballot, likely next April, and you guys get your sales tax shot down. This is all they've got left south of the river, so this is what they're going after and going for.
Yeah, I think it's fair to always question the methodology of any survey. It depends on how the question was asked. You don't want a new stadium tax, do you?
Yeah.
No. Exactly. So it depends on how it's asked and who was asked. And to your point, perhaps more people would have been surveyed if this were a larger ongoing thing. But this kind of sounds like it was whipped up,
It was whipped up to come to a conclusion that fit those who paid for the poll. That's what this is about. 913-408-7710. Especially those of you in Clay County. Do you really think it's 70% right now of those who are against moving the Royals up north? And I'll tell you what the ace up the sleeve is on this whole thing. Also, Commissioner Scott Wagner in Clay County just after 8 o'clock.
We were made aware of that poll today. We aren't sure who commissioned that poll. What I can tell you is that we've assembled a team of local and national experts with sophisticated polling experience. That polling data has been very constructive, and we see a path to victory in both counties.
That's Sarah Torville. She is the Royals Executive Vice President, and that was her comment yesterday as she was asked by the media, hey, what about this poll that just dropped? Kansas City Business Journal had it. Conveniently, the day the renderings came out for the North Kansas City Stadium option and the East Village Stadium option, showing 70% of Clay County residents would be opposed to a sales tax for a new stadium in North Kansas City. That was her answer. She said she never saw the poll, and she says that her polling, their polling, the Royals polling suggests that there is a path to victory to get a sales tax done in North KC. Now, what's interesting is that we do know now the Royals are expected to pick their location sometime in September, and then it's likely to be on a ballot next April. That's where this is trending in terms of our timeline. And I do know that there's a lot of people in Clay County who support this, who have been behind this. And I'll get to this here in a couple of minutes. The ace up the sleeve of Clay County. I'll share with you who and what that is coming up on KCMO Talk Radio. 913-408-7710. How you join us on KCMO? Cindy is up north, and she was apparently one of the residents called about this poll. Good morning, Cindy.
Good morning, Pete, Mark, and John.
Hey, say good, guys, can you say good morning to Cindy since she said good morning to you?
Good morning, Cindy. Thanks for calling.
John?
No
I
problem.
had the honor of speaking to her first.
Oh, you talked to her off the air. Okay. All right. So we all said our good mornings. All right. So you were called, Cindy, about this poll, and what did they ask you?
Well, this was about 6 to 8 weeks ago, from what I remember. And they just asked various questions if I thought that the stadium was a good idea. I said I don't really mind as long as it doesn't impede traffic and parking and crime rates. And then they got to the last question, which was about the sales tax. And I said no.
Now,
right
how did they frame the? I mean, I know we're going back a few weeks.
They just came out and said it. You know, would you support a 1 cent sales tax? They didn't frame it in any odd way.
Okay.
Or push it one way or another. This is just from memory. And I just said no. I mean, I usually don't answer random calls, but this was from an 816, or your area code here is 816. I'm sorry. I'm from Southeast Missouri. So 816 area code. So I thought I'll pick it up, and it was a pollster. And sometimes I answer polls and sometimes I don't. But this one I did. So it was about 5 or 6 questions. Like I said, but it was about 6 to 8 weeks ago. They could have had the information out by now.
Was it a machine asking you or an actual person asking you questions?
A live person.
Okay. Live person. Do you know if it was with this group, Bold Decision? Did they identify themselves or no?
They did, and that does not sound familiar.
That does not sound familiar. Okay. Doesn't mean it wasn't them. Maybe they, will use some other kind of name, but you were commissioned 6 to 8 weeks ago in a poll asking about your interest in the Royals moving north and whether or not you would have a sales tax or support a sales tax to bring them up north.
Well, it was like maybe 6 or 7 questions just about how I felt about it. Now, how do I really feel about it? You've been to Italy, right?
Yes.
How old is the Coliseum, and is it still standing?
All right. Well, thank you very much for that, Cindy. Thanks for calling in as well. Since you were
guys
actually
have a nice, cool day.
Yeah, stay cool there, Cindy. Stay cool.
I thought we had talked about this is a long time ago. Maybe when this first came up, wasn't there a survey going around that was real general, and we were all trying to figure out if it was about the stadiums? Do you remember that conversation?
Yeah, that was 3-4 months ago now, I want to say.
In a time frame of people trying to remember back, sometimes that gets condensed.
Yeah. I mean, who knows? Maybe it was like the Royals pollster that called her. We don't know. So
I'll add a nuance just because I know there's a thing called screening, and sometimes people think they're being surveyed. The screening is to find out if you fit what the client wants, what age, what gender, whatever, right? And so sometimes people will get screened and they get asked 4 or 5 questions, but something may disqualify them, and then that's all you ever hear. So that's not necessarily a survey, but that might lead to another call with bigger and more questions.
All right. Well, 913-408-7710. Tony's in Kansas City. What's up, Tony? Good morning.
Hey, man, I just got a couple things here. One thing we're going to support them coming up north. Hell, we want it. We need it. So it's all right. There's nothing for the stadium where it's at now. It's just a boring old place out in the middle of the desert. But one thing we've learned, you don't believe the media, the mainstream media. You do Pete Mundo, of course. But that, and you don't believe the polls. They've lied about the polls forever. But if you was going to believe the poll that they had the question mixed up. Do you like Quentin Lucas versus would you pay a 1% sales tax? And they got that mixed up. So I do believe the 70% was right, but it was toward whether we like the mayor or not. So it's just kind of confusing on their polling. They just, they mixed in polls up down then. So anyway, that's my belief.
All right, Tony. Thank you very much. So Tony's of the opinion that they mixed up the questions, and the 70% answer was to not liking Quentin Lucas. Well, Tony weaved into my next point here. I have talked to many folks up in Clay County who are trying to get the Royals to North KC, and they all believe that the ace up their sleeve and the best thing they have going for them, the two individuals who are helping them, helping drive the Royals into their arms up north, Quentin Lucas and Frank White. They firmly believe that the opportunity to stick it to both of those guys will emotionally get Clay County residents to vote for a sales tax to bring the Royals up north. To, in many ways, pull one over those two guys. I don't want to say screw over because I don't think anyone's getting screwed here if the Royals go north. I think it's actually okay for Kansas City. I think it's actually okay for Jackson County as well to spread the wealth, so to speak, spread the tax burden around this county a little bit, or around the region, I should say, a little bit, where Clay County gets the Royals and then Jackson County and Kansas City will focus more exclusively on the Chiefs. I don't see a problem with that at all. And I think as you heard there from Tony, distaste that the mayor and the county executive leave in the mouths of Clay County residents is one that might get people to, who wouldn't normally vote for a tax increase to say, you know what, screw them. I'm voting for that tax increase. I don't think that's a crazy idea. And I know for a fact that there are elected leaders up in Clay County who believe those two guys help their cause and could help get that across the finish line and get a yes vote from Clay County residents on a sales tax to bring the Royals up north, to twist it a little bit in the back of Quentin Lucas and Frank White. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just telling you that's what they think. Paul's on KCMO. Paul, good morning.
Hey, Pete. Yeah, I was just commenting. John talked about how you phrased the polling question. Mine is the timing of the question. We've got a product out on the West Coast. They're getting their head handed to them by the worst team in baseball. And I as a Kansas City, don't believe this ownership group wants to put a winning product out there. So why would I want to pay my hard-earned money to build a new stadium for a product that's going to be substandard? And I think the timing right now is impacting that because people are like, look at this team's terrible. And
well,
There doesn't seem to be. Go ahead.
Here's what's interesting, Paul. I know that you're busy, so you probably didn't watch the press conference yesterday. But at the beginning of the press conference, President Brooks Sherman, no relation to John Sherman, started off the press conference talking about how well the team has played the last few weeks. And he rattled off some stats. Bobby Witt Jr. OPS over 1,000. I mean, he really was greasing things up a little bit out of the gate, saying, I know we're here to talk about the stadium, but how about this team? We're playing some good baseball lately. So they're aware of that, to your point, Paul, but they're trying to, grease it up a little bit and remind you how well this team has played the last month or so.
Yeah, well, Pete, the reality is that it's August. We're 20-plus games out of first place in the worst division of baseball, so he can spin it all he wants. Kind of like tonight, they'll spin it. So we're not buying that. In August, when you already tanked, it's easy to get wins against the Mets and some of these other ball clubs. So, the product, I just don't get this feeling from the ownership group. It just seems to me they want a new stadium to boost their market value of their team, but not put a product out for us here in Kansas City. That's my point.
All right. Thank you very much there. Appreciate it, Paul. Hey, they're only 26 back in the division.
The better the team, the more money they make, though. So I think they want to have a good team.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, here's the thing. You build a new stadium. If the team stinks, you'll have 1 to 2 good years of people coming out to see the new ballpark. And after that, you're going to be back to where you were if the team is this bad. You might make a little more money off all the commercial real estate, the restaurants, the bars, things like that, parking. But in the end, not much is going to change unless the product does improve. That is true.